The elevator key with my name and the wrong floor. The elevator key was inside my suit jacket where nothing heavier than a folded program is supposed to live. Small brass, cool to the touch, looped on a leather tag stamped with the hotel logo, the kind of key that tells the elevator you mean it. On the tag, written with a black marker that had rehearsed restraint, were two words, 4AIDEN. Underneath, a floor number 23, and as if it regretted being coy, a short line scrawled along the edge, "If you still want the truth." I don't collect keys to rooms I didn't ask for. I paint signs for a living, coaxing letters into being legible without asking them to shout, and I share an apartment with Leo, who builds exhibitions that make museums look kinder than they usually are. 5 years in, we've learned when to set down two glasses before saying the sentence that changes a day. Last week, I found a hotel receipt in his coat. He called it a donor dinner, late and loud, the kind that ends with a cab over a quiet explanation. I didn't believe him, but disbelief is not a plan. Brass in my pocket felt like one. The hotel was one of those places that decides your walk for you. I was in a suit I couldn't afford twice, smelling like varnish and winter. The elevator panel had a keyhole just where it wanted to keep secrets. When I inserted the brass and turned, the button for 23 lit up with the authority of a new verb. The ride was smooth enough to let my heart make the noise it makes when it thinks it can hear the next hour. The corridor on 23 had the soft carpet of regret. The room numbers glowed like restrained opinions. Halfway down, a door stood cracked as if someone had taught it to breathe. I knocked anyway, because I was raised by a man who made cabinets and insisted on telling Wood the plan. He opened the door with his hand still on the chain, like a courtesy or a dare. "Matteo." We met twice in rooms that were too pleased with themselves. Taller than I remembered, dark hair that had given up on discipline, shirt unbuttoned enough to write subtext without metaphor. He smelled like cedar and the last hour of a room that had learned everyone's names. When he unhooked the chain and stepped back, his eyes didn't leave mine. "You came," he said, and the lamp behind him wrote his cheekbones in a language I didn't want to translate. "Your penmanship is persuasive," I said, holding up the key and feeling foolish and right at once. "Leo is downstairs paying for the part of the evening that's supposed to explain him," Matteo said. "He thinks he's meeting me to stage a polite exit. He forgot I run better shows." "Do you?" I said, even though the room already knew the answer. He let me pass into a space that was better at pretending it had been measured than at hiding what had been done inside it. Two glasses on the table, one with a thumbprint shaped like a habit. A jacket over the back of a chair I could describe in my sleep. I touched the shoulder of it with a finger and pulled my hand back as if it were hot. Scabbed honesty. Reflex. "I invited you because I didn't want to keep being a surprise," Matteo said. "I don't want you to hear about me from the version of him that hates himself. I wanted you to have the room and the light and the smell of the air before he opens his mouth." "And what do you want from me?" I asked. "That feels better than absolution." "Accuracy," he said, coming close enough for breath to have an opinion. "And for you to decide without writing it as if an audience were waiting." He didn't touch me. Not at first. He watched my mouth the way men do when they're trying to tell the truth and their bodies would prefer a shortcut. The heat in the room moved without permission. When his fingers reached for my wrist, he stopped a fraction short. That pause had more charge than any gesture I've seen written as erotic. It asked and kept me responsible for the answer. I said nothing, and he smiled in a way that was not a win. He poured water and handed me a glass. Our hands touched. Every nerve I own that remembers beds wrote its opinion, and I filed it. We drank standing there, two men whose ethics were busy and whose skin had not been consulted. Leo came in with the face of a man who wants the room to be better behaved than it will be. Cedar already on him. The jacket on the chair swinging like it had been waiting to get a word in. He saw the glasses, the distance, the tilt of my body away from the heat that was still there like a volunteer. He did not look at the bed. He closed the door carefully because hinges are old and truth too often sloppy. "Okay," he said. The lobby's piano made a sound through the floor I could feel in my ankles. I put the key on the table and it clicked like punctuation. "You brought him," Leo said to Matteo without looking away from me. "I brought the truth," Matteo said. "He can leave with either one." "You could have just left," Leo said to him, then to me, and I kept pretending I was a good man with an unfortunate weekend. "You don't get to pretend anymore," I said. "You get to choose." He set his hands on the back of the chair that wore his jacket, and I couldn't help seeing his fingers near the seam on the shoulder I fix when shirts come from the dry cleaner with secrets. The city at the window did its glitter impression. The room waited. "I cheated," he said, no rhetoric. I loved him in that breath for choosing plain grammar. I told myself I had been lonely long enough to deserve a warm mistake. I told myself you hoarded pauses and refused finales and that this was a way to get one. I told myself I could keep the kettle faithful and the cedar weekend enough. All of those sentences were written by a coward. "Don't steal my line," I said, more gently than I expected. "I get to describe you." "You get to decide me," he said, eyes bright without asking for a speech. Matteo had moved near the door like it had hired him. He touched the frame with the backs of his fingers as if checking a patient's temperature. His shirt hung open one step past safety. He watched the admission land and didn't make a theater of not enjoying it. I hated him for that decency. I admired him for it. I wanted his hand on my shoulder and I did not. Two truths took up the same square meter and behaved themselves poorly. "I'm not here to plead," Matteo said. "I'm here to quit, and to give you the room he kept for me." "Thank you," I said and meant it like salt. "You're leaving." He nodded and met my eyes like a contractor taking measurements. He stepped to me and lifted a hand that stopped at my neck without claiming, heat without narrative, and put his mouth near my ear without touching. It made my whole body a siren. He said, "You don't belong in sentences you didn't draft," and then he left. Leo didn't move. I didn't either. Somewhere a man down the hall laughed like he was grateful for his limits. I sat at the table and put both hands flat. Leo came to stand on the other side. We were two men with a piece of furniture between us and years assembling themselves into a kind of future that suddenly needed a different manual. "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me," he said. "I'm going to ask you to write what happens next in a way I can carry. I'll sleep on the not-guest couch. I'll tell you twice next week what this was, once in the museum language that uses narrative as spackle, and once with the small words I stopped trusting. I'll end it. I'll do the work. I want to stay. I'm going to ask for small things that cost a lot," I said. "You'll end it without compliments. You'll say you liked being two men. You'll admit you used my patience as a passport. You'll return the cedar to whatever tree it came from, and we'll see if my hands can hold you without lying about my wrists." "I'll do all of that," he said. His mouth trembled like an amateur. I loved that too. Loving him was not the problem. Wanting justice to feel like sex was. We walked home without touching. We waited at crosswalks like we were freshly old. Our building's lock clicked a little cleanly and betrayed no one. He spread a blanket on the couch and I went to bed alone and slept one of those throes of sleep you only get when your body is exhausted by decency. The next day he ended it, not by text, not with cleverness. He came home smelling like nothing, which is what I wanted. He told me about Mateo with the small words that make no one better than anyone. He said, "I like being applauded by someone who had not seen me be kind at 7 a.m. He said, "I wanted a finale because I was tired of work." He said, "You build things that last, and I wanted to ruin something as proof I was alive." I told him I would stay and we would work. We set down 2 glasses before saying sentences that changed days. We touched less and then adequately and then carefully, and then with that lazy precision we learned early and had almost forgotten. The kettle went back to choosing drama. We forgave it. I returned the key in an envelope with no note. The clerk nodded the way a city nods when you do a small thing right. I repainted open for the bodega on our corner. The owner wanted gold leaf, and I gave him breath, and he framed it with 2 ferns because looking like an invitation is not the same as being one. I cleaned a lens for a donor portrait and caught a man touching his wife's wrist like he remembered it. I considered offering that as evidence and decided to mind my business. Weeks later, I ran into Mateo outside the museum. He looked smaller, or maybe my anger had been making him taller. He said hello with the correct amount of shame and zero appetite. He didn't smell like cedar. We stood like weather with manners. "Thank you for not turning me into a speech," he said. "I prefer accuracy to applause," I said. "I know," he said, and looked like a man grateful for the concept of the exit door. "If another key with my name appears in my pocket, I will bring water. I will sit somewhere I can see the door without thinking it a dare. If heat arrives, I will let it be a visitor, not a command. I will let my mouth learn restraint and my hands work on the day in front of them. When I decide, it will be because I can carry what comes after, not because I needed to win the moment. It is unsexy, this fidelity to repair. It is also the only thing I have found that holds.